Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit ActiveDay.com to apply.
Sports Card Nation, the hobby is the people. Weekly news and interviews, it's your number one source. Sports Card Nation, the hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 340 of Sports Card Nation. Got a returning guest this week, but before we get to the guest, let's get to some house cleaning stuff. My apologies. I missed a hobby quick hits. That rarely happens, if ever. I am battling a stomach bug, I believe a respiratory infection. Not feeling well at all. And just couldn't get it done. And my bad and on me. But thank you to those who reached out with feel betters and get well soons. I'm a little bit better. I'm not anywhere I need to be yet. I'm still battling. You know, as some of us know, right? The older we get, the harder it is to shake some of these things compared to our younger selves, and that sometimes that's more scarier than the illness itself. Not really, but you know what I mean. If you know what I mean. No breaking cardboard this coming Friday. I'm scheduled on an out-of-town trip. I'm not even sure I'm going to make the out-of-town trip. If I feel like I do, as I'm talking to you today, I will not be going on that trip. But if I progress and start to feel better, I will be out of town. So either way, no breaking cardboard Friday. We'll get back on the horse with that and hobby quick hits ASAP, and as soon as we can kind of get our feet back under us. But Sports Card Nation goes on, as these are, truth be told, pre-recorded episodes and double episodes, which we started doing probably over 6 months ago to make the episodes shorter in length. And along those lines, to make them a little bit shorter, and I know people love commercials as much as I do. That's sarcastic, by the way. I know we got some great sponsors. That's not changing. But we're only going to run one commercial, one sponsor. We're going to feature one sponsor per episode. In the intro, I'm going to thank all our sponsors, which are Iron Sports Cards, which is today's featured sponsors. Upper Deck, love Upper Deck. SGC, love SGC. And Sports Collectors Digest. So we'll thank them in every episode, kind of in the intro part, and then we'll feature one of them with one commercial rather than three. So the episodes will get, a little shorter for you, although they're pretty short comparatively speaking to what they used to be. Happy to say Drake McGruder is back again for part 2 of our great conversation. Some wrestling talk, some national talk, and love Drake, and gonna have to have him back on because there was some stuff we didn't even get to. So that's enough with the intro. Let's start the show. And now the conclusion of our conversation with Drake McGruder. So we have another. I don't probably collect him as much as you do, Drake, but a guy I know you collect who, and we'll talk about this, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, I think's criminally underrated, which is Peyton Manning. I think part of that reason is he played, during the same time period with Tom Brady. And I'm a Steeler fan, so I don't have any direct. I just love Peyton Manning as a person. He's just, while he's not shy, he, unless he has, he's always been funny, even before his post-career broadcasting and commercials. Even when he was playing, he was a funny guy. And, While he didn't necessarily seek the limelight, he didn't shy away and kind of gave his honest assessment. I've always really admired him as a player and as a person. Even though he wasn't a Pittsburgh Steeler, but he played again. I don't want to say in the shadow, but during the same time period with Tom Brady, and he still won 2 rings, and maybe have a few more if it wasn't for that meddling Tom Brady. And my Steelers might have another 1 or 2 as well as a team. But if you look at the numbers, and even if I took his name off and just say put the numbers up against each other and take the rings out, the 6-2 or whatever, like I make the people think I'm nuts. I as a quarterback, I think he's actually a better quarterback. He just played with a different coaching system, different personnel. I've had other people tell me you're crazy for saying that, Newman, but I'm a football guy. Like I've coached it, I've played it. I think he's like I said, underrated. I try to pick up his stuff, and especially on the rookie side, but even stuff that's not rookie cards, it's just maybe low printed numbers. And sometimes for what I get it for, to be blunt honest, is surprises me. Like, wow, that's all that went for. Kind of your thoughts as someone who's even more so, knows the greatness of Peyton.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's all great points. So just kind of background with me on Peyton, right? So I grew up in the Memphis area. I ended up going to school. I'm a Razorback. You can see all the stuff behind me, all the Arkansas stuff. But I was a Tennessee fan growing up. I think, I was a pretty good kid, and the way I rebelled against my parents is they were Arkansas fans. And so I wanted to root against everybody that played against Arkansas. And then my mom was actually a high school teacher, and all of her teacher friends either went to Tennessee or were fans of Tennessee. So like for Christmas and stuff, we'd get together and they'd always be giving me an orange shirt and that whole sort of thing. So that's what caused me really to become a Tennessee fan. And then Peyton Manning, when he came along, I was in my teenage years. And so, you're emulating the star quarterback and that whole sort of thing. So I got to go see him play in college and just really liked watching him play. And obviously in the Memphis area, his cards were probably the most accessible. So you walked in the hobby shop and there was Peyton Manning stuff all over the place. So I felt like I could just pick up his cards, pretty much nonstop. So it was easy to build a collection of Manning cards as a teenager. And then he goes onto the Colts, and that was when I was in college really for the most part. And then, then he gets injured and finished his career with the Broncos. But, one of the only 2 players outside of Tom Brady to win a ring with multiple franchises, which I think is really cool. But yeah, just to your point, I mean, and really the reason I collect him is, he's a great guy, great family guy, role model, as much of a superstar as he is. I've got a guy in my Peyton Manning group chat who lives near him in Colorado, and, he's showing up to his son's little league games, and he coaches his son's, football team. And, he's very accessible, just even as busy as he is, right? Just a stand-up guy, family guy, a guy that I, really look up to and really appreciate, just what he does. But, when you look at it from like a hobby perspective, right, he was long valued more than Brady. And again, that was back when cards were relatively inexpensive. And then, after Peyton got hurt, and then Brady, really, took the like 2012, 2013, I forget the Super Bowl year, but when Brady kind of won that ring, it's like things flipped. And then Brady got a little bit more expensive than Peyton, and kind of kept going on and on and on. But, when you look at it, right, I think Peyton would have had at least one more Super Bowl with the Colts, had his special teams defenses not, right? And then you look at Tom Brady, and Tom Brady, phenomenal quarterback. I'll say he's the greatest of all time, right? I think that's really not up for debate. But man, you look at some of those offensive lines that he had. You and I could have won a Super Bowl, but behind those offensive lines, and the defenses, just nasty defenses. And so, I think Brady was helped by having that great support cast. And I think that's why when people get into talking about, who's the GOAT and who's this and who's that, I'm like, gosh, it's a team sport. And while the quarterback is the quarterback, and that's who runs the show, and that's who gets all the accolades and all that kind of stuff, you've got to have a great special teams, and you got to have a great defense, and you got to have some luck to win a whole bunch of Super Bowls. And so that's why, in my opinion, right, like Peyton's regular season Super Bowl, I mean, not Super Bowls, like most valuable player awards that he has, those speak a lot more to me because, hey, you had to do that over the course of a season, much more than like, yeah, you maybe made it to the Super Bowl and you were the MVP in the Super Bowl, but that's just one game, right? Yeah, you had to get there, but that's just one game. And so I think when you look at that just from a stat standpoint, what you did kind of cumulatively in the course of the career, and then you go on to the Broncos, right? And then he set the record for most passing touchdowns in a season, most passing yards in a season, which he still has those records. And nobody now.
Not to cut you off, Drake. When he went to the Broncos, people wrote him off. They thought that was like he was coming off the neck injury, had the surgery. Like they thought he was going to flame out there. And quite the opposite, as you just pointed out, happened. He had some of his better years, a few. And like you said, won another ring there. So people who left him for dead, as Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend, right? And so exactly. But go ahead.
No, exactly. No, it's certainly a great point, right? And so they left him for dead, and then now you see the quarterbacks that have an extra game to do it, and they're not even sniffing that record. Right. So I think it just speaks to how just great of a quarterback that he was, and then people get in and say, well, his, ring that he won right before he retired in Denver wasn't really because of him. It was based on the rest of the team. I'm like, okay, well, then you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say that, the Patriots won all these rings only because of Brady, right? When it was obviously a team effort. But then turn around and talk out of the other side of your mouth and say, well, with Peyton, he was kind of down and it was the team that won the ring, right? You really have to have it both ways. But I think, just purely from a hobby perspective, I think, there's always going to be, a few guys that really suck up all the value, for the most part, and then everybody else kind of falls in line after that. So I think that's what you're seeing a little bit. And then certainly relevance post-career, plays a lot. So I think it's more than just stats, right? It's how often your name's coming up and what you're doing and what you're involved in and, that sort of thing. And I think Peyton has had his moments over the last few years in the hobby where, he's gotten his due, but I think over time, especially now when people really, you start backtracking and think, oh, wow, this quarterback, had a great season. And it's like, yeah, but he wasn't as good as Manning and, or even a Roethlisberger, from your Steelers days, or, some of these other guys that are just all-time greats. I think as time goes on, the hobby and, us as just football fans, we're going to look back and be like, wow, I mean, that era of quarterbacks that we went through, kind of that 2000 to 2020 era, was just absolutely phenomenal. And so I think it's always going to be compared to that. And I think as time goes on, people are going to look back on that more fondly. The last thing I'll say too is when you look at quarterbacks now, I think Patrick Mahomes, phenomenal quarterback. But I think if you put him against some of the defenses that Brady and Manning and some of those guys had to play against, I don't know that he's winning as much as he is right now. So again, it's hard to compare different eras, and we can always play the what if game and what could happen. I love watching Mahomes play. My son's a fan of the Chiefs. That's who he looks up to as a kid, and that whole sort of thing. But, you always kind of wonder the what ifs, and what if this guy played in this era, what if Peyton played now? Is he as good as he was back then? I have no idea. So anyways.
Yeah, all great points, Drake. It's hard to compare eras, but you pointed out that era of quarterbacks with the Roethlisberger, Manning, Brady, and others. I could probably add Brees and so on and so forth. It might be the one of the greatest eras of quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. And if you put, going back to Manning, like I said, it's criminally. If you even Roethlisberger, and I'm not trying to be a homer here, but if you took their name off the stats and just showed their career stats, didn't say how many rings they did or didn't win. You just put up the numbers and percentages, and you looked, and Brady included, they're all they're in the same sort of ballpark. But obviously, when you win 6 rings, that puts you in a different air, and I get it. And maybe, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but it's from a pure quarterback perspective, those guys were just as good. And even like you said, you take some of the defenses that Brady had and other supports, that probably the best coaching staff money could buy at that time, at least, right? That the others didn't. I think that makes a huge difference. But just, hey, I would have no problem. Like the question, like, hey, you got to win this game. You got one quarterback. Manning would be at the top of my list. And Brady's right there too. I'm not trying to, besmirch Brady's name or his accomplishment, but I just think we don't give Manning and even others. You mentioned Roethlisberger, but Manning, especially to me, the more credit. And when you look at the numbers, they speak for themselves. And it might be, I think you touched on it. It might be maybe starting now, but it might be years later when they're sort of not necessarily still getting some attention for post-career stuff, that we just look at the numbers and say, man, why didn't we talk about more of the greatness of Peyton Manning than we did? Not that it's not talked about, but to me, it should be more. And it's, one of my favorite cards is Manning's Stadium Club rookie. Mm-hmm. Aesthetically, obviously it's a Manning rookie, and those things are going for like $10, $15. And that to me is insane. And I'll buy them all day in that range. And just they're not even for resale. I just love the card. It's one of those cards I can never have. I have 10, I want 11. I get 20, I want 25. And just they go way too cheap. I'm not gonna it's almost crazy not to buy them for the aesthetic reason and for the greatness of Peyton. And so hopefully, more people kind of see it. I think it's starting. I think you mentioned that we're starting to see that. The fact that he stayed active and he's on ESPN and doing stuff with his brother in commercials, and I think that helps. But even if he didn't, when you look at the numbers, they
Sure. Yeah. And just to wrap that up, I think it just goes to show that hobby, relevance and valuation goes beyond just numbers, right? And I think I think Chris McGill, probably his rating system is good. It's like the MVP awards, whatever sport you're in, that's kind of how when you're ranking like the greatest or best of all time, that's a good way to do it. But I argue back with him a little bit on the whole. Okay, well, I value regular season awards a little bit, more than just a single game most valuable player type award, and that whole sort of thing. But yeah, it blows my mind, just to be frank, whenever you see some of these quarterbacks they're exciting to watch. But when you've got guys like Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels, who are, some of their cards are selling more, than any Peyton Manning card has ever sold for. I just scratch my head and I'm going, gosh, like what? These people that are spending these six-figure amounts on these cards, like it just seems like there's only one way for them to go but down. And so, yeah, it crosses my mind a lot.
We see that in baseball too, with some of these Bowman colored autos go for highly regarded prospects.
Yep.
But 5-6 figures, and you can get an established Hall of Fame high graded rookie card for that of someone who cemented their legacy. I scratch my head, probably like you do, and like Jeepers. For that kind of money, there's so many safe bets. I get it. There's the adrenaline rush, the risk, whether we like it or not. I guess that's the form of gambling. Like, I'm going to put this chunk of change out there and take a chance, and hopefully it pays off, with the chance that I could lose my shirt here too. But so I get that. But man, for that kind of money, it's just so many other ways I would go. But again, to each their own, like you said earlier, and what have you. So, but like you, I'm not necessarily a Tennessee fan or a Colts fan, but I'm a Peyton fan, and anytime I can grab some stuff of his for the prices it goes for, it's like to me it's a no-brainer, and I try to do it. It's when I go to eBay or any kind of like sales site, it's one of my first searches, just because it's so fun to see what's out there, and then for whatever reason what it's only bringing, and I do it. So
no, for sure. And and you mentioned being a fan. Sometimes I wish I was a fan of one of those teams, like hardcore, because there's a guy I know, he'll only buy his Peyton Manning jerseys in his Tennessee jersey. Colts fans only want it in the Colts jersey. Broncos fans only want it, in the Broncos jersey. And I tell everybody, I'm like, I don't care what jersey he's in, I'll buy him. Like he could be in a Pro Bowl jersey. he could be in in like a pickleball jersey, and I might be interested in it, and so it certainly stretches you thin sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at least a little less thinner because we still get some great deals on them as well, Trick. So
Time to hear from one of our great sponsors, but Sports Card Nation will be right back after that.
Iron Sports Cards is your #1 source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
Let's go! You are listening to the Sports Card Nation podcast.
You get to travel around for your employment and your job, and we're Facebook friends, so I get to see some of your your exploits and your travels. And you seem to make a point, which I would do too, and I do when I do travel. You travel more than I do, so that's why I'm at. But you always try to make a point that whatever city or town you're in, just to see the local LCSs or show. Kind of speak to that. Is when you're going somewhere, like, do you kind of try to plan that in there based on how much time you may or may not have?
Oh, yes, for sure. For me, I love cards, but I value those a lot, but the community aspect is great. And so if I can go and stop by a local card shop somewhere, and I'm on a trip, it's always great to go in and see folks, and maybe you see them when you're visiting that area, and then you say, hey, I'll see you at the National, right? And it's fun for me because I enjoy just walking through the shop, and I'm not walking in typically. The stuff that I look for is probably not going to be out, sitting in a display case, right? At this point in time. And so, but I enjoy just going and seeing what's out there and just talking with the shop owner and just asking how things are going and, what they're selling, what shows they've been into, what things you're looking for. And it's also good to develop that relationship because then they can keep an eye out. And they go to a show and, they're in Chantilly, or they're at, some show on the East Coast, or they're in Dallas or out at Burbank or whatever. And they may see something they know I'm looking for, and then they'll send me a direct message, right? And say, hey, I saw this at the show and I thought of you. And so I think it's great just to maintain those relationships and, just be able to talk cards and look around and visit and, sometimes snap a photo out front and then you throw it on the social media, and that helps them out from an awareness standpoint, and things like that. So I try to just to do that, just really more from a community aspect, and, just develop and try to keep those relationships, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. I call it like being an ambassador, an advocate, right? You're promoting the hobby, you're promoting your passion for the hobby, and at the same time, like you said, highlighting the store. Maybe someone sees that and says, oh my God, I'm there once a month for whatever reason. I didn't even know about that store. Now I'm going to check it out next trip in. So, I think it's great. Again, that sense of community, right? And getting the word out and that sort of thing. And it makes, even though the hobby's large, as we both know, it makes it feel smaller, right? Those connections, it makes it feel a lot smaller than it actually is. Even though it's growing by the day, it's those kind of, in the trenches kind of relationships that, mean so much. And like you said, can pay off dividends both ways, right? Someone remembers, hey, I know you're looking for this, or collect this, I got this in, and vice versa. And, you can't put a price tag on that sort of thing. Segueing into the National, for me, and I think I speak for you here, Drake, and I'll let you speak for yourself. It's the week we circle on the calendar every year to try to get there, if not for the whole week, at least a few days. And, no matter how many you've been to, I think this coming one will be my 6th or 7th. For as long as I've been in the hobby, I've only been to 6 or 7 Nationals, but you always look forward to it. And the minute it's over, you count down the days to the next one. And it's obviously the cards and acquiring some new cards. But it's again what you kind of talked about. It's the people, events after the show, whether it be a sports event in the town that's holding the National, or just going to dinner with friends and meetups, and if you're in the trade nights and that sort of thing. So it's just a whole event in itself. And what we know the National is today, and even in talking with Dr. Jim, who's been to every one, he'll tell you like the National today is different than what the first incarnations were and what they were supposed to be. It's evolution of the show itself. For you, kind of speak to the National, kind of what it means and for you.
Yeah, for me, I mean, you kind of took the words from my mouth, right? The National for me is just getting together with friends, whether it's like, it's a Peyton Manning group chat or a wrestling group chat. There's people that, you only see really once a year, but you talk to them almost every single day. And so they're great friends, and you feel really close to them, and you know what's going on in their life with marriages and kids or job changes or, sickness or something like that. And it's just a great opportunity to, get together and go to dinner and talk cards and have group meetups and things. So I really enjoy that. Last year I actually brought a friend with me for his first National. And so he's also going back this year, and I'm trying to convince a couple other friends that they need to go to the National and all that. So that's always fun to me to kind of, because I remember my first National that I, ever went to was in 2021. Yeah, 2021. And that was, I just remember how excited I was and how just jaw dropping and just, oh my gosh, this place is huge. And what am I going to do to navigate and all that sort of stuff. And so it's like, I want them to experience what I experienced, because that to me is like really, really cool. And it's fun for me just to walk around and see all the items on display. Like I love looking at some of the, I think it's typically like a heritage auction that has a big display set up and things. And I think last year they had like the costumes from the Power Rangers and the slippers that Dorothy wore, and and like just that type of stuff to me, just the historical artifacts, and whether it's wrestling robes or baseball jerseys or bats or something like that. That's fun for me just to look around, and then you get to listen into some of the speakers that they bring on stage. That to me is a lot of fun. But really, first and foremost, it's all about the people and getting to see people. And if you come home with a card, or you sell a card or trade a card, I mean, that's just the icing on the cake. Like I remember the first year I went to the National, and I was like, okay, I've got to buy these cards. I got to find these cards, and it's not going to be successful if I don't do it. And that quickly changed, like not long even after I got there. I'm like, forget the cards. Like, this is just cool. I just want to go to dinner. I want to hang out. I want to look. I want to touch, see, like that whole sort of thing. And so, I mean, that to me is what the National is really all.
Yeah, I agree. And it's nice to grab a couple cards when you can. Last year I did better than previous years, where I was always scrambling sort of at the end before I had to head back. Last year I got a card on my list earlier than traditionally speaking, which is nice because it sort of takes that pressure off. But unless God forbid something bad happens, you really can't have a bad National. Even if you, like you said, even if you don't get all the cards on your list, or you don't do as well as you kind of come in, it's all those hanging out with friends and in the chats, and even on the show floor itself. Sometimes I gotta watch, like, because I'm a talker, as you know, and sometimes I'm like an hour later, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta hustle, and I try not to cut things short, but sometimes you lose track of time, and especially if I'm not there. I usually am there for the full week, but every once in a while it might be a 4 or 5 day one. I'm like, man, I gotta like really utilize my time, maybe a little more so than if I was here the whole 5 days. I'm only here 4 or 3.5 or whatever it might be. And I'm glad you talked about the first one, right? So when I went to my first one, which I don't know, was it 2017, 2018? It was in Chicago, and everyone's like, "Oh, John, they're giving you the breakdown. This is what you do." And even when you get in that scouting report, once you walk through those doors, and you kind of mention yourself, yeah. And I don't care what anyone tells you, it's even bigger than that. It's even bigger than the scouting report or the sneak previews that people are telling you what it's like until you actually get to one. And even now, 6 or 7 in, it still has that. You get that adrenaline rush, and you're like a kid in a candy store. I don't care how old you are. I'm in my 50s, and it's like being a kid in Christmas, and that's what it should be about. And like you said, you're telling people you got to go to the national. You got to go to at least one. Like if you can go to one and say, it was good, but no. If you can do that, all right, you gave it. Don't knock it till you try it type thing. But chances are, once you go, it's going to be like again that week you circle on your calendar every week. For me, it falls into summer school, which is a little easier to get out of than the regular school year. So my supervisor knows that week I'm going to miss 3 or 4 days because it's really the same. It's the end of July and the front part of August, based on depending how the days fall, but it's pretty much the same week every year. And it's just there's so many things from events outside the show to the show itself. It's just a great hobby week. You're not going to get that many people a part of the hobby in one place at the same time. That's the event. I know we've had some other great events. I'm not knocking those, but I call the National Super Bowl of the hobby because that's what I feel like it is. We look, if you're a football, even if you're not even people who are not football fans know the significance and impact of the Super Bowl and watch the Super Bowl. To me, it's the Super Bowl of the hobby because you just have every aspect of the hobby represented, from collectors, dealers, manufacturers, content creators, everything. It encompasses everybody and everything, and it's just something that I look forward to every year. I almost didn't go this year. I'll make this quick, and just for me, Chicago, I got to fly. It could be logistically, it's a little tougher, a little more pricier, and so I was kind of on the fence. And my wife, who will not go to the national with me. She doesn't care anything about the hobby. She'll go to the national if the city has a beach. So she went to Atlantic City. That's the prerequisite there. So she knows she's not going to Chicago. So she says, "You're really not going to go?" And I said, "Well, I'm not officially not going yet, but if you ask me today, I haven't made any kind of reservation." This was a few months ago. She goes, "You know what's going to happen, John. If you don't go, you're gonna be miserable. You're gonna, So it was my wife. I got to give credit where it was due. It was my wife that sort of like, you kind of gotta go, don't you think? Which is funny, that she was the one that says, it was like I had card friends that are like, how do you not go in Newman? Like, but it was my wife hearing her say even that, I think, was the one where the light bulb went on, and like, wow, even my own wife, who doesn't care anything about, is supportive but doesn't care about the hobby, is saying it. And I thought that was funny. I got to give credit where it's credit. She was the one that kind of pushed me over the edge.
For sure. Oh, that's great. That's great.
So listen, we didn't cover everything. We're gonna have to have you, as long as you come back. We'd love to have you back on. I don't want to keep you too long, but again, glad I finally got you on. Again, we won't make it a one-hit wonder. Love to have you back. There's some other stuff we can definitely touch on. And as you know, Drake, the hobby changes so much. We could do this again in a month and fill another hour or two with no problem, with no script. So for those listening that want to follow you, like, where can they see what you're doing, and if anything you want to share out there, social media?
Yeah, thanks, John. So for social media on Instagram, I'm at Drakes_PC. And then on Facebook and X, I'm at Drake McGruder. So that's typically where I do most of my card stuff, but really card stuff would be the Drake's PC account. So feel free to reach out if you've got similar collecting interest or have something you think I might be interested in. Don't hesitate. So would love to connect.
I'll put you on this before we kind of wrap it up. Is there whether it be a Peyton Manning or a wrestling card, is there something that's eluded your grasp that you're looking for that you want to share, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I mean, I can. It's kind of funny. So last year around this time, I would have said it was Peyton's Essential Credentials Future rookie card out of 7, and then that fell into my lap, and I was totally not prepared for it at the National last year, but I made it happen. And then actually last Friday, there was a Peyton. It's an Ultimate Collection NFL logo shield that he also signed as well from 2005, and that got posted by a company named as Acquire. And I was actually driving with my family down to the lake for the holiday weekend, and I got 3 direct messages, and I'm like, what's going on? And they were like, you got to see this. You need this. You got to go get it. And I was like, I'm trying to drive and not run off the road and be careful and all that. So that's probably going to be my big national purchase for the year. So I'm going to have to, I'm getting that. I'm actually planning to pick that up at the mall. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to get that. There's still a few that elude me a little bit. I'll just share with the group. So I would love to get it's Peyton's 1998 Bowman Chrome Golden Anniversary Refractor. It's out of 5. Those don't come up very, very often. I'm trying to complete his finest gold X-Fractor set from 05 and 06 finest. I've got the 05 and I need the 06. So those are really my 2 main chase cards for Peyton right now.
So you heard that, everybody. If you can check those off Drake's Need List, reach out to him, and you're not going to find a better nicer and better Peyton Manning collector. So we talk about that satisfaction we get from getting someone a card that they're looking for, right? In this case, you won't find a better guy to get it to. So hopefully some of those. Well, you mentioned the one for sure at the National. That's a big one. The National's already going to be good. It hasn't even started yet, right? Even if you're not sure, right, the worst he can tell you is like he's all set, or maybe he knows. I know I think Brett even collects paints too. So whether it's something Drake needs, or maybe he knows someone else who could utilize it, that's the beauty of community right there. So Drake, as always, appreciate you coming on. We'll if you'd like to, we'll do it again as well.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate you having me, John. I'd love to do it again. So thank you.
All right. Thanks. It was great having Drake on. And like I said, we're going to have him back because I didn't even get to everything, all the bullet points on my list to talk with him about. So, great guy, right? Great ambassador for the hobby. And again, I love having those people on the show. I love getting to know those people. To the point where we, become friends and hobby friends and such. And they're just great to have in the hobby. And there's more probably like that than not. And but still, when you find them and you get to know them, that's even better. So again, thanks to Drake for giving us some time. And if you enjoyed this episode, go back and catch next week, last week's. If you haven't already, he was on that as well. So we're going to hear from our Hobby is the People announcer of the week and some closing thoughts and wrap up this week's episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
Hello, rookie card collectors. Victor, the rookie card specialist on YouTube, reminding you that the hobby is the people.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.